everyone, it's Michele from Scrap Secrets and welcome to another card making video. In this video, we're going to make these 3 cards with the Create and Inkspire kits and Distress Oxides. The first card that we're going to make is the one that was at the bottom, the green one. This is a piece of 3 3/4 square watercolor cardstock. It's just the Canson XL watercolor paper, so nothing really special, something that you can buy at any local craft store. And the image is the leaf image from the stamp set, from one of the stamp sets that comes in the kit. So this is almost like a wreath builder. I put it in the top left corner and just rotate the paper and stamp it around. It's going to create a center focal point for the sentiment, but it's going to also create a nice border around the outside edges. So I'm just stamping it 4 times with the Catherine Pooler Midnight ink, which I find to be it was very easy. This is the first time I've ever used the stamp, and I only needed to ink it up once. Now I'm getting ready to choose the sentiment from the sentiment stamp set, and this one says "Hello, friend," and we're going to stamp it right in the middle. Using the leaf to make that wreath around it just gives a very nice focal point for the sentiment. So I'm just going to line it up, and then I'm going to use the same Catherine Pooler ink to ink up the sentiment. Fairly easy card, but we're going to do another step with it. So the nice thing about today's cards, we are not going to be doing any coloring. So often my videos feature Copic coloring or Prismacolor colored pencil coloring. This is no coloring whatsoever, but we get 3 really nice cards out of it. So I'm taking Distress Oxide in Pine Needles. I think that's pine needles. And I'm going around the edges with my makeup brush, concentrating it more towards the edges and leaving the middle kind of open, still having the like the white of the watercolor paper. But I kind of wanted to do a circle, but when I started inking up, I realized it wasn't even, and then I was smudging it, or getting fingerprints in it. And just go back over the sides of it to darken the sides up, and then kind of just move the brush towards the middle a little bit, but applying very, very little pressure so that the sentiment has a very light coating of that pine needles on top of it. You can barely even see it. So we're just going to go over it, and this just gives it a nice look. Again, it still highlights the sentiment, and you can see the pieces of the wreath. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to do is I was taking a water bottle and spritzing some water on top of it because the Distress Oxides will react. You can see the oxidization at the bottom, and I think it just gave it a little something extra. So that was an easy card to make. It didn't take that long. Okay, so card number 2, we are going to be using some more Distress Oxide, and this is Twisted Citron, and I just put some on a clear block, and I'm flicking it off with a paintbrush. So we used a couple colors of Distress Oxide. The first one was Twisted Citron. The second one, I believe is, and I didn't put this on screen, Ripe Persimmon. I used Picked Raspberry, and then we went in with, I believe, Salty Ocean is the blue that I use at the end. So just, again, spattering on the color just to make a kind of bold watercolored background. I was looking for something different to do with my oxides rather than just applying them on the paper, and I remembered this technique, and I just love the way the splatters all come out. Just trying to clean up my work surface too, because again, I'm a messy crafter and there was Distress Oxide everywhere. Now I'm going in with Picked Raspberry and doing the exact same thing. I just stamped it out on the block, put some water on it, and then just flicking it on there. And at the end, you'll notice that I got some paint where I didn't want it. I got a big splotch down at the bottom. So right there you just saw it. And I didn't like the way that looked because I actually did this technique on the back of this, and I liked the way it came out, and then I decided to put some pink on there and I ruined it. So I started over and then got this background. And I didn't love that big pink mark right there. So I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. I spritzed it with a little bit of water and then took a messy paper towel that I just had lying on my desk and pressed it down to dry it off before I put the fourth color of Distress Oxide on there. And yes, that is Salty Ocean. Did the same thing, put it down on the block, sprayed it with some water, and then used my paintbrush to flick on that color. And the paper was a little bit wet. The blue wasn't dry when I go to do my next step, and you'll see that it creates almost a happy accident, I guess. So I was just trying to dab on some blue, and I was liking the way that this came out, with the exception of that pink mark at the bottom. It was really driving me crazy, and I couldn't figure out what to do. And then I was trying to dry it off a little bit, and because I kind of had an idea in my mind what I wanted to do. So I added more of that picked raspberry to the to the block, and then I went over it. And as you can see, the blue was not dry, or the blue was still on the paintbrush, and so it came out a pinkish purple. But I actually like it. It toned down the dots in the back, which I probably should have done a splatter over top of this, but I decided that I didn't want to ruin another background, and I liked it the way it was. I liked that there was the pink and the purple in the background, and I liked that it had the stripes going back and forth, and it wasn't edge to edge. It was something that was different than my normal style, but I liked that you can see the splatters through it. So now I'm taking one image and one sentiment from the stamp set, and I'm going to ink them up in Catherine Pooler Midnight ink, that same ink. I'm really loving using this ink lately. I purchased it from Kindred Stamps. I needed something so that I didn't have to pay for shipping. I needed something else to go into my cart so that I could get the free shipping, and I decided that to get that ink, and it was probably the best purchase I've had in a while, because I really, really love this ink. So it says "Thankful for You," and then this is a really pretty floral image. I just wanted to keep it pretty simple because the background is a little it's out of my comfort zone, because it's not exactly even on all sides. So it was driving my OCD a little crazy, but I really do like the way it turned out in the end. So I just stamped it a couple times because I think the background was still wet and the ink was kind of absorbing into it. So now we're going to do a sunset background for the last card. So we are using Wilted Violet Distress Oxide, the picked raspberry, the ripe persimmon, as well as squeezed lemonade. And you'll see in a second here, I found an image online that I was using to try to create the background. If you saw there it is, right there. And I just thought that was so pretty. That I love those colors of sunsets. If you saw the mermaid video that's a couple back, you'll see that I did a sunset, and I was loving those colors. I love the way that it turned out, so I wanted to do another one. Now, if you noticed in the background, the yellow and the orange they weren't layers. Like when most people do backgrounds, they do it in layers, a stripe of purple, a stripe of pink, kind of like I did here. But I wanted that orange and yellow to mix, because if you saw in the picture, it wasn't a straight line of things. So I probably would have mixed them a little bit more, but I really like the way this came out. I'm just going to go and cover up the background with all different colors. Now I'm going back and forth and blending, because these aren't the colors don't blend the best. They're not too far apart, because where they don't blend, but I had to go back over it a couple times. This was a very light piece of cardstock. It was a 65-pound weight cardstock from Recollections. If I wanted a really, really smooth blend, I would have used Bristol smooth cardstock, but I just used what I had available, and it was right next to my desk, so I decided to just use that. I was trying not to keep getting up. Fred was sitting next to me while I was doing all this crafting, and I was loving it, but I was afraid that he was going to jump off the chair, and I'm still nervous about him jumping off of things. He makes me very, very nervous. I still carry him a lot of places. So anyway, back to the card, and I'm just going to go over and just blend these. And if something doesn't look right to you, just keep blending them. They will eventually blend together, and I think it looks great in the end. So there's my background. I'm just going to, again, clean off my desk because it's just messy. And that spot at the top, that's from my Gamsol. Ugh. Okay, so now I am taking the stencil that one of the stencils that comes with the kit. There's two. There's a cloud and grass stencil. Clouds on one side and stencils on the other, or the other end. And then this floralish. So this can be a bunch of different things. It's not very specific. It can be flowers. It can be grass. It can be like leaves and things. Sorry, I was just moving this up so you guys can see it. And I thought, let's do a shadow. And I like the way the black looks against these images. So I took some black soot distress oxide and used one of the mini ink blending tools, which I haven't used in a while. I don't have a black blending brush, so I decided to break out the mini ink blending tool and just go over it a couple times. So since there was no ink on that, on the little foam pad, I had to ink it up a couple times before the ink would go through. And since it's going on to wet distress oxide, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't gray and it was really, really dark black. So I had to keep going over it a couple times. And you'll notice that I just swipe up instead of swiping in circles at the very end, because I think that just made it to where there were smooth lines. Okay, and then there is the final product of that and the background. And I love the way it came out. I love the way the sunset looks. And then the black as a, I guess, juxtaposition, I guess if you want to call it that, against the background. So I thought that looked really good and really shadows. I really like this image. Okay, so I couldn't find my Catherine Pooler ink at first. So I was using this MFT Extreme Black ink, but clearly it is dried up because it didn't stamp good. I stamped it a couple times and it was so light on there. And I think this is the one that I took over to my sister's house to have the girls use, and we ended up using the Memento ink that I had bought them last year. So it says, "Friends bring color to your world," and I thought that was really pretty with the colorful background. So that's it. Those are the 3 backgrounds I created, and then here they are on card bases. That's a 4-inch square card, and then these other 2 are 4.25 by 5.5 regular A2 size cards. I matted them all on black cardstock. I think it just popped, and they just looked beautiful on it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have comments or questions, please feel free to leave them below, and I will see you again real soon for another video.